Mafade, everybody, and hello to wherever you are streaming us live right now. Jason Salas, Chris Barnett, Ken San Nicolas, and we are bringing you the TrendSpotting Live podcast. We do this each and every Thursday right here on Facebook Live and on YouTube. We are talking about the issues, guys, that have bubbled up. We're talking about the social media reaction to it, what we've learned new, and I think it's fairly obvious what we're going to talk about today because it seems that that's not only us, but it's what basically everybody seems to have an opinion about in a variety of ways, Chris. Of course, right. The Mike San Nicolas story, which you have been on all week.
Yeah, and so this kind of broke over the weekend, and 2019, the media, we find ourselves, it's weird, reporting on stuff that happens on Facebook. And so this all started on Facebook where John Paul Manuel, who's a former chief of staff and campaign manager for Congressman San Nicolas, and also when he's a senator, had commented something along the lines of on a post that San Nicolas had posted with some troops who were serving in Qatar, and he basically said, "Oh, if you want to support the troops."
Is that how you say that country's name?
Qatar, I guess.
Qatar.
He basically said, "Oh, if you want to support the troops, don't sleep with their wives when they're deployed." And there was just a whole bunch of stuff that went down, and basically he alleged in these comments that Congressman San Nicolas was has been having an affair with mistress. That's so funny how we use that word, mistress, for I guess going back several years from when he was a senator, and he put in these lurid details, and they were kind of they were voyeuristic, fly on the wall style, where if it was true, it was something that only somebody who was involved would know. So he said that they'd spend time in the closet, and then Senator San Nicolas's office, and then he also alleged that he had used campaign funds to pay for trips and hotel rooms with this alleged mistress.
Which, to be fair, is the angle that you've been really trying to press on.
Yeah, and really, I mean, it happened over the weekend, and we were kind of conflicted on whether or not to cover this because it was a personal allegation of, someone cheating on their wife, and, I think it's fair to kind of run that over. I mean, is that newsworthy? And I think where it became newsworthy was when he alleged that there was a misuse of campaign funds. And I just feel like if this was the States and it was a similar situation, it would just be all over everything. Because, the national media, the things that they cover, you have a sitting congressman and a former chief of staff, coming out and making these allegations, and I think that on its face is newsworthy.
Yeah, Kanye West puts in a certain color of contact lens and everything that, and the internet goes crazy for the next 3 days about it. I mean, this is technically a matter of, as you said, public funding. I mean,
it's debatable.
He is a public figure.
If you guys don't think a politician having an affair is news, then that's it's really a judgment call for the viewers. So we just put the story out there. I mean, we weren't even the first media to cover it, and I think that when the other media really covered it, it kind of was like, okay, I mean, this is something that everybody's talking about. So I mean, we'd almost be remiss if we didn't do something on it.
But I would dare say, and Ken, you're a social media director, and you pour through the comments more than any of us here. What's been debatably even more interesting than the issue itself is the way that people have responded to it, across the spectrum. Some people very much in favor of, other people saying, hey, lay off the guy, other people saying, come on, keep pressing, there's a story here.
And I think that's going to, and depending on what kind of story it is, you're going to have very polarizing comments, and that's something that we do have, right? We see a lot of people who are disappointed with the situation, hey, Mike,
I believed in you.
Why, you were going to do all these good things for Guam, and it turns out you're just doing this and wasting our taxpayers' money, but then we have people on the other end saying, this is a private issue, it should have never been put out to the public, what he does is, I guess if we're measuring morality and morals here, what he does shouldn't be judged. He should only be judged solely on what he does as a congressman, right? But I think there's a huge gray area here, as Chris has said, because it's not just the implication that he may or may not have had this affair. It's that he may or may not have used, funds to fund the trips and to
I
the
disagree.
relationship.
I think it's all relevant. I think ask anybody who's married. Like if someone has an affair, I mean, it's kind of a testament to their character or whatever. And so I feel like where it went from just being a personal issue for me is when you look at the rules of the House of Representatives, and that they expressly forbid sexual relationships between Congress members, representatives, or delegates, and people who are in their staff. And the reason for that is it's the Me Too movement. So basically, Congress decided that there's no such thing as a consensual relationship between a delegate or a member of Congress and their staff because of the power differential. So, I mean, basically they're saying that it's an abuse of power on the part of the member.
And that, of
makes
course,
sense.
that of course, is the legal aspect. Ken, you were just talking about the moral.
So to me, that means it's not. I mean, people can say all day it's a personal issue, but actually, this is covered under the professional rules of Congress if the allegation is true. And I think that's. We just put it out there, and you guys decide. And obviously, Congressman San Nicolas has a rabid fan base on social media, and I'm just curious to see how all this translates out in the real world, because I think being in the media, we put just so much focus on what happens in social media, and we tend to forget that there's a lot of people out here who don't even have Facebook or don't even go on it as religiously as the rest of us do.
So whatever way you guys feel about this, streaming this right now, we want to hear your comments, so get them in. We're going to feature them. We'll pop them up on the screen too, because we're not trying to push any type of particular agenda for right here. We're just trying to examine the issue, kind of get to the heart of exactly what's going on. Chris obviously has spent quite a bit of time this week and this weekend, last weekend, work on the story, and we're right now just measuring. Can you even consider it fallout at this point? Because I mean, the story continues. There's been no resolution to it at this point.
And that's, I think you make a strong point here that there is absolutely no resolution, because Mike San Nicolas has spoken since the whole
incident. He hasn't spoken. He did a Facebook post.
Well, yeah, he has responded, but unfortunately
on Facebook, that's not a real response. I don't think.
I mean, it's a response because, to be fair, John Paul Manuel's his response is what we use as news. His Facebook post.
Right. Yeah.
So to be fair, Mike San Nicolas' response, which is a post, is also a response. Okay. But what's confusing to me is that instead of giving a concrete yes or no about the entire situation, it's just kind of I'm doing this. I'm working with the FBI, and we got some guy. I don't really know. Maybe Chris, you can explain the whole FBI angle, the investigation. I'm not really sure what.
I don't even know. The thing about and this story and what's happening with this story and the way that the congressman is responding and not responding to it. I mean, I think it's indicative of a larger problem that we've reported on, for his whole term, and even going back to when he's a senator, is he just refuses to be transparent. He refuses to be accessible to the media, which is a basic tenet of public service. Every other senator, every governor, lieutenant governor, mayors, they respond to us.
Okay, wait, but
they do interviews.
Changing of the time?
But just in terms,
could be a changing of the time.
Sorry, just in terms of the protocol, just so people out there watching this right now are aware of it. Because you are a public servant, when you work for local government, federal government, military, whatever, what are the parameters of, because you file more Freedom of Information Freedom of Information Act requests than any of us here, the Sunshine Act, right?
Yeah.
You're officially soliciting a particular government agency to give us some sort of information.
Right.
Typically, you can just call them and everything like that.
Yeah.
As a courtesy, they'll respond.
Yeah.
If not, then you can always issue that. And because they're the public sector, at that point, they're obligated to, right? What on paper do they have to do, and what can they not do?
Well, so right off the bat, Congress is exempt from FOIA. So I can ask the congressman, and I have. I mean, God, we've sent him, I want to say, over 50 emails over the last how many months. Just
every time I walk by the Xerox machine, literally, there's something. It's like a Freedom of Information request.
Yeah.
Dear,
Yeah.
respectable, sinceramente, Chris Barnett.
So I just don't. I mean, the issue that I have is that he hasn't been accessible, and I feel like any other elected official would have that, opportunity, would provide an opportunity to the media. It's like, oh, I'm under all these allegations. I mean, usually in, the real world, you'd have like a press conference.
So, this whole issue, it helps compound a bigger issue about transparency that you discussed, and we have a package that's going to roll right now about Congressman San Nicolas issues, even with the GEC.
Yeah.
So we'll roll that for you right now.
It seems Congressman Michael San Nicolas doesn't just have problems with filing his reports with the Federal Election Commission. The Guam Election Commission has put him on notice. GEC Executive Director Maria Pangilinan.
At the Guam Election Commission meeting last week on Thursday, the commission decided to send the congressman a letter to let him know to file his reports with the Guam Election Commission.
According to that letter dated last Friday, August 30th, a recent audit of campaign finance reports revealed that the Michael San Nicolas for Congress Committee failed to file the required campaign reports for the 2018 general election with the GEC. According to Pangilinan, although he's required to file with the Federal Election Commission, he also has to file locally.
Both the Guam Election Commission and the Federal Election Commission have jurisdictions over the campaign finance reports. We're the equivalent of the Secretary of State office. So across the nation, there may be other offices that do campaign finance. In some jurisdictions or some states, campaign finance is a separate entity. In other counties, it's one and the same with the election office. But here on Guam, the Guam Election Commission deals with the elections and campaign finance as well.
According to the letter, San Nicolas failed to file his 2018 July quarterly report, a year-end 2018 report, his 2019 April quarterly report, and his July 2019 quarterly report. The GEC has given him until September 4th or by the end of the business day tomorrow to turn in those reports. Failure to do so could result in a misdemeanor. Additionally, in light of the most recent audit, the letter states that failure to file all reports by the deadline will result in a fine of up to $10,000 per offense. Because the GEC has not adopted electronic filing, the congressman or his representative must file all his reports in person at the commission. As we reported on July 31st, the Federal Election Commission also issued a failure to file notice to the congressman for missing the deadline to file his July federal campaign finance report. He eventually filed that report 2 weeks later. Reporting for Guam's News Network, I'm Sabrina Salas, Matanani.
So we're back, and I think, of all the stuff that, there were just two major allegations that John Paul Manuel came out. One was that Congressman has used his office to enable this affair that he's been having for many years. And there was just a bunch of stuff where he said that, instead of being in session during the budget hearings last year, San Nicolas was down at McCrowd's getting drunk. And we did a story on that, and I guess one of the things that John Paul had said that really cracked me up, it was just kind of like a demonstration of the Chapman kind of lifestyle, was that he said the congressman was so paranoid that KUAM had got a picture of him and his alleged mistress that he made John Paul drive him back down to McCrowd's, and they were looking for like any cameras outside. So he alleged that there were the misuse of campaign funds, and that Congressman San Nicolas used campaign funds to reimburse himself for money he spent on this, I guess, love junket to the Philippines, and then hotel rooms both in the Philippines and here on Guam. And so, I've covered the congressman's campaign finance, and not just his. To be fair, I covered so many different campaign finance angles during the election, with the gubernatorial election, with the senatorial people, and I've reported that Congressman San Nicolas, when he was a senator, also had these issues with campaign finance. God, I must report how many times that he had an illegal $3,000 donation from Quartec. So that's what caught my ears when John Paul said that, there's a misuse of campaign funds. It kind of clicked with me, because I was like, well, I've been trying to say that for how many years. So he said that there are other examples, because he was the campaign chairman. He said that the congressman would routinely reimburse himself for personal expenses with campaign funds. And you could see it if you look on his campaign finance reports. There'll just be all these, they call them repayment, loan repayment to the candidate, and there's not a lot of supporting details. And there's different amounts. There's one I was looking at just last night is $4,000, and it doesn't say what the reimbursement is for. So I think there's something there in this campaign finance stuff. And GEC obviously thinks there was something there too, because and I have a little bit of familiar knowledge of this, is that the congressman is supposed to file with the Federal Election Commission, and he's also supposed to file with the state office of the FEC, which is the Guam Election Commission. And he hadn't been doing that, and they sent him a letter. They basically said, hey, you're supposed to be filing with us, and if you don't file your stuff with us, we're going to fine you $10,000. We're going to slap you with a misdemeanor, which I think is pretty interesting because the GEC, I mean, for whatever reason, they're pretty lax on enforcing the campaign finance. I really think that's something the senators need to tighten the laws.
Now,
on.
sorry, would having a misdemeanor, if it ever gets to that point, would that in any way jeopardize his standing as a sitting member of Congress?
No, because it
It would have to be a felony, right?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
And so they had until.
I mean, it wouldn't look good, obviously,
Yeah,
but, you know, that,
yeah.
that doesn't mean he's automatically going to be, like,
Sure.
removed.
Yeah.
So I mean, like,
And so he did. They filed the reports yesterday, but
oh, he filed them already.
so they filed them like it was due at 5. They filed them at like 4:30 or something, and then with the reports, the campaign committee chairperson Jennifer Wynn gave this letter, and we have to remember too that he's been getting pinged. Like his campaign, they just got 3 letters from the FEC in the last 2 months. They've had this GEC issue. John Paul's making all these allegations about the misuse of campaign funds. So I'm not even concerned about the affair. I mean, I have my own opinion about that. But I think what we need to look at is, and what John Paul is very familiar with, is having been the campaign chairperson, is really shine the light on these campaign finance allegations. And so Jennifer Wynn, the district director and campaign committee chairperson, submitted this letter to the Guam Election Commission, and I'm just going to kind of gloss over it, and I've read it a million times. I can summarize it for you. She first starts by saying, in discussion with the GEC rep in March, we were told federal filing is sufficient, as reports are filed electronically with the FEC. Well, first of all, the GEC says no one ever told them that. And then they go on to say that we acknowledge that the GEC had attempted to notify our campaign committee by sending notices to the prior treasurer, and the new campaign committee received its first notice on the 30th of August via hand delivery. And then they go on to say that we've submitted these reports, but FEC software was inaccessible to the new committee members in January of 2019. We worked with the FEC, and the recommendation was to carry the totals from each category. We're in the process of rebuilding the data files. I've never heard that. I don't even know what rebuilding the data files means, but to me it basically means
Filling the
they're
blanks.
pulling numbers out of their, you know.
So I mean, I don't really know how it works, but I'm assuming like with this any kind of audit of some nature, you have a total, like you say, there's a $4,000 repayment loan back
Yeah.
to Mike San Nicolas, right?
So they're
this
supposed to have all the
$4,000
receipts
should
and
have a
stuff.
bunch of receipts that
Yeah.
match this
Yeah.
amount, right?
Yeah.
But
But they're now saying that, and you know, I think it's interesting that John Paul is calling for an audit of their campaign finance stuff, and they're now saying that we have to rebuild all the data. We don't have all the information. So this letter basically says like the reports we just gave to you guys are inaccurate, incomplete, but we're trying to recreate them out of thin air. And I think it's problematic, you know, and I'm curious to see what the GC is going to do with this. They have a meeting coming up, and it's really up to the commission. So what they're going to do is they're going to take this letter, which I think is kind of a glimpse into what's going on the federal level for them. They've been getting all these letters from the FEC, and this kind of confirms that there's something major with their campaign finance stuff if they're going to have to rebuild the data. And what I've seen that's pretty consistent is for someone whose campaign slogan is Responsible Guam, the congressman doesn't take responsibility for anything. I mean, his top 2 excuses are prior staff, which is what this letter says. This blames, I'm assuming they're blaming John Paul Manuel, okay? And they're blaming the former treasurer, Shelley Calvo. So the top 2 excuses for him, it's always prior staff or, vast left-wing conspiracy, which I think is so crazy coming from a Democrat. You know, you have this Democrat who says that there's all these government officials and they got nothing to do. They're not busy. All they do all day is just sit around and plot my downfall. And that's what all this is about. And to say that there's an active FBI investigation, I mean, dude, when you call the FBI, they don't tell you they're investigating people. They don't. They
I was
say,
even wondering,
yeah.
like, if you're, I mean, regardless if you're a federal official or a local government official, and there is a FBI investigation
Yeah.
going, can you even talk about it? Obviously, you can't go into the mechanics of it.
Oh, he did.
No, but I mean,
Yeah.
you can at least acknowledge it, apparently.
You can do whatever you want,
so we have
but the FBI can. Yeah.
You had an 11-minute interview with, we have an 11-minute
Right.
excerpt of an interview you did with John Paul Manuel. It's on our Facebook page. You can view it there. We're going to play a couple of excerpts from that interview where John Paul talks a little bit about the possibility of an FBI investigation.
He has reimbursed himself for personal meals and personal expenses. You'll see in his campaign finance forms, I mean, most of the money that we raise goes back to him, are reimbursed to him. So he'll just save receipts for any personal thing and reimburse himself. I am doing this because of my own conscience. I am doing this because I helped this man get to where he is, and I feel bad for the amount of times he forced me to lie to his wife. I feel bad for the amount of times he forced me to lie to other staff. I feel bad that he has become the person that he has become, someone who feels like that he is above the law. And I don't think that anyone, including a U.S. congressman, is above the law. I would say to the congressman that the truth will set him free, that he can work things out with the FEC, and that if he comes clean and tells the truth about everything that has been going on, I think that'll be the best thing for him. You know, I've known him for 6 years. I was with him and his closest confidant for a very long time. He knows the things that I know, and I know that he is afraid of the things that I know, but I am not afraid to tell the truth. I had heard that he had been doing so since December privately from members of his own staff, initiating federal investigations. You know, I've known about that since December, and I thought that he was doing so in order to intimidate me or threaten me in order to keep quiet about the things that I know. But I know what the things that I'm saying are true, and I know that if he initiated an investigation since December, if I really was doing anything, I'm pretty sure they would have arrested me by now.
So right there, you got to see a small excerpt from our 11-minute video interview with John Paul Manuel that you can find on our Facebook page. John Paul there talking a little bit about the likelihood of an ongoing or existing FBI investigation, how it's probably unlikely, and if it were, like, wouldn't they have come to a resolution?
Yeah, let's just
6
debunk
months
that
later,
right now, because
right?
I mean, I asked the governor, I asked the Democratic Party chair, I asked pretty much every senator, and none of them have been contacted by the FBI, which I think is just weird. So if there's all these government officials who were somehow under an active investigation and none of them have been contacted by the FBI, I just think that's a little...
Also, your comments at the end of your story, like yesterday, was really interesting because, you know, when you did talk to the governor or several other government officials, they came back with very, very swift and very strong statements saying we're disavowing ourselves of this issue. They're like,
so
because this is serious.
Yeah.
In the excerpt that we have from John Paul, he talked about the misuse of campaign funds and how it's a crime, right?
Yeah.
This is against the law. In the event that Senators or Congressman San Nicolas is found guilty of this, like, what happens? Like let's say we aren't, here's the personal loans or whatever given back to Mike San Nicolas.
Yeah.
They don't balance with the receipts. What's the next step? A
So I
$10,000 fine and a misdemeanor, and we're
Good
back
go.
to square
Thank you.
one.
Right, yeah.
Like, I mean, it's assuming that there's this level of corruption. Is that all that there is to it? Just a $10,000 fine and.
Well, I think the Guam Election Commission, if they open this and they audit, it's not going to stand up. I mean, even if you just look at his campaign finance stuff, there's just so many question marks that I think if they audit it, and by their own admission, they're saying that, nothing's adding up and we have to rebuild the data files. Going back to last year, which coincidentally is the time that JP is accusing San Nicolas of misusing campaign funds. So you mean to tell me that he came out and made these allegations and now they need to go back to that time frame that he zeroed in on and rebuild data files? I think it's highly suspect. And I agree with John Paul. I think, and I'm surprised the Federal Election Commission hasn't audited San Nicolas yet. I know that he's going to get a fine. Like I said, they've got 3 letters to him. He failed to file the July quarterly, and there's no grace period. So from the day after the deadline, I think he filed it like more than 2 weeks late. And so that's federal. And I mean, he's going to get fined. It's just got to go to the Federal Election Commission. They got to vote on it, and then you appeal it. So it's a long process. But I think locally, if they do the audit, it's not going to stand up, and then whatever happens after that, I don't think. I mean, San Nicolas has basically had this habit lately of just bombing on Guam and hating on Guam and saying that all the locals are dirty. You know, everybody's corrupt. And I'm like, okay, you've been in Congress 8 months, and all of a sudden, we're all corrupt. Like, you were down here with us, you know, dirty locals just the other year. And so, and I think that's what he's trying to do, is he's trying to throw so much mud on the local government that his fan base doesn't believe anything the local government says.
Can I just ask you about that for a sec? Since you're talking about John Paul Manuel, right? The impetus and, you know, the catalyst of this whole story and everything. We've been talking about the Mike San Nicolas angle up to this point. But when you sat down with John Paul Manuel, the full-length interview was about 11 minutes. I'm sure your actual conversation was much longer than that. You know, camera setup and everything.
Yeah.
We shot that, the camera person did, in a very distinct way. It was down at Skinner Plaza, so
Right.
it looks visually, it's a very relaxed atmosphere. It's very inviting. The tense nature of your conversation. I mean, he
Right.
got emotional on at least one occasion.
I thought he was going to cry. There was one point.
Okay, he was saying things of a very, very heavy nature.
Yeah.
How was that like to actually sit with him with that? And like at some point, did you actually ask him? It's like, okay, in the interest of fairness, what's your end game for this whole thing? What do you
Yeah,
get?
I mean, and
If
people keep shooting the messenger, and like that's not my style. I mean, everybody's got a motive. I mean, I just look at what the message is. So, you know, these allegations he's making, I'm just looking at that. I don't, you know, he's got his motive. San Nicolas obviously has his motive. So everybody, no one is coming in here without a motive, right? And so I just look at the allegations, and I feel like him explaining it to me, he said, yeah, I believed in Congressman San Nicolas, and I guess just being with somebody, you start doing things for them and you're close, and then one day you look up and you're like, what happened to me? Why am I doing all this stuff? So I think he just kind of had that moment where, I mean, there was obviously a split in the relationship, and he told me, he's like, I just kept seeing San Nicolas and the traits he exhibited just getting worse over time, and it just reached a point where he was like, I just feel like the more power he has, the more he's going to get away with. So that's why he came out. So because people keep saying that, oh, why now, and I'm like, why not? I mean, why, you know, if he did
did he say at any point that he has some sort of, or did he indicate to you that he does have some goal that he wants to achieve? Because he has said, you know, he wants to do this because he had a conflict of conscience. I'm paraphrasing.
That was basically it.
Yeah.
He
wants to purify his soul.
He couldn't live with himself.
Okay.
He was just like, I'm tired of having to carry this burden, and that's kind of what I felt when I interviewed him. I mean, to me, he didn't come across as someone who was a whack job. He was very level-headed.
He's not looking for a payday, right?
Oh, I mean, he's got a job. He's already got a job.
Okay.
I don't think he's...
Because people were asking that in the comments, too, to be fair. You know,
Oh,
they
is
were
he
saying-
trying to sue anybody? No, I don't think he is.
Well, I mean, he was promised the position, right? Or like,
And I think
Well,
that was in another media, and that kind of was. I feel like it was really irresponsible, because when I talked to him, it was never about the job for him. Like he said, his father was sick. His father died in January, so I mean, yeah, he had obviously thought that I'd been with Mike all this time. And I think what happened was, the more that he, according to JP, this is not, you know, my take, I'm not insinuating, the more that he told the congressman that, hey, you have this mistress, it's not right, you're going to hire her, that's not right, it's against the House rules ethically, you know, I mean, you're just putting yourself in all these you know, dangerous positions. I mean, and I think the more he told the congressman that, the more the congressman realized that, wow, this guy could really hurt me. And had he kept John Paul Manuel, and obviously I think that if you listen to what John Paul Manuel is saying, that he was already having that crisis of conscience, you know, back then. And so how it works is, if you're a staffer of a congressman and you whistleblow, there's all kinds of protections for congressional staffers who want to whistleblow on the members of Congress that they work for. So, I mean, some of these protections are afforded is that, let's say John Paul stayed on with the congressman. He went to D.C. and then he was like, I just can't take this anymore. I got to tell people about it. Congress would basically pay for his lawyer, and he would be very, very protected. And so I wonder if that somehow played into Congressman San Nicolas letting John Paul go and not picking him up, because he was like, wow, if this guy's getting on me about hiring my mistress, and I hire him and then he turns on me, he's going to have all these protections and this could get really bad. But if I let him go and he makes these allegations, then he's just a disgruntled former staffer, which is what a lot of people are painting him as. But I don't get that from him. When I sat with him for minutes and we message each other, and I feel like what he alleged about the affair and the misuse of campaign funds, I don't even think that's the biggest information that he has. Like, I'm going back and talking with him, and like I said at the beginning of this, Congressman San Nicolas doesn't respond to KUAM. What he does is he goes to media that kisses his butt. And then he tells that media to say, like, oh, well, why are you saying he's not accessible? He's here. I mean, he just won't go to any media who's going to ask him a tough question. And not even, being biased, but I think media is supposed to be critical.
Okay, well, sorry, can I ask one more thing? When you were sitting there, because I know even long before you and I worked together, is when you interview people, you have a tendency to read their body language, read their eyes and everything like that.
Yeah.
What was the impression you were getting from John Paul in terms of does he have a sense of peace now? I mean, he said in your interview with him.
I think he's scared.
Okay.
I think he's scared. I could tell by his body language that he was scared. I mean, so I interviewed him on Plaza de España, and he walked across, and he's looking around, and
looking over his shoulder.
He said he was threatened by a member of San Nicolas's family. So, we were supposed to do an interview a couple days before that, and I had an anxiety attack. So he's really put himself out here, and I mean, to be fair, the allegations he's made, obviously, they had an impact on San Nicolas and his family, but he is just getting dragged on social media, and some of the things that people are saying about him, I mean, it's just cyberbullying. I mean, they're calling him a jilted lover. Just all these things are thrown out.
Interestingly enough, there's a lot of people watching our live stream right now. Only one comment, and it's about the audio level, which, by the way, you can just you can turn up. Go into your volume settings and turn both the master and the media volume up. But there's a lot of people watching this right now, so obviously a lot of people are still intently interested.
Yeah,
it's just no one's really talking outwardly about it.
I just want to go back and say that, I don't think the affair and the misuse of campaign funds. Remember, and he first alleged it was 3 instances. There was a hotel room at the Outrigger, which he provided the receipts for. There was a hotel room in Tagaytay, and then the trips, right, the ticket or whatever. But in talking with him and just kind of walking back all the stories I've tried to do on the congressman that he has never responded to, now I have this source in John Paul Manuel where I can say, hey, I tried to do this story on, these digital ads that Congressman San Nicolas had played on the Guam Land Use Commission Chair Tay O's digital signs in Tamuning. And we all saw the ads during the election, but when I was studying San Nicolas's campaign finance report, there was no expenditure to Tay O's company. There was no disclosure of, let's say Tay O gave the ads for free, he would still have to list that. So it's nowhere on there.
Okay.
So I asked him just this morning, I said, hey, I was trying to do this story. Tay O, ignored me, and I just didn't have a story because we didn't have video of the ads, but were the ads given for free? And he said, yes, Chris, they are best friends. They went to FD together. Tay O gave Congressman San Nicolas free ads, which is a major violation because you can't take free stuff from a business, and he's got to disclose it. So I feel like there's bigger things that John Paul can reveal, and that's why I feel like they're going so hard on him now on these allegations of the affair, is because I think they're worried that, if anything, whether it's true or not, I mean, just him saying these things, it puts it out there, and I think that's what's making the congressman nervous, and that's why we're seeing the reaction that we are.
So I feel like it's a really difficult situation to openly debate about, simply because we never get a response from Congressman San Nicolas' side.
crazy.
So it's so hard. He's the only, literally the one local
He's the
political
only
figure
one.
that we just don't get responses from. So I think it's really tough to give a story that comes across as non-biased, simply because we only have one side of it ever.
Congressman, what are you scared of? I mean, let's just sit down, let's do an interview, let's address this head on, I mean, I just don't understand. He's a highly intelligent guy, obviously. I mean, I don't understand why he doesn't engage the media, and I feel like it's because he can't control that interaction, and he really seems to be about control, and that's why I think he goes on Facebook, and it's this one-way communication where he posts something, and we in the media feel like every time he releases something on Facebook, there's just more questions, and there's not that avenue to say, hey, I know you posted it on your Facebook. What did you mean by active FBI investigation? Because he just won't respond. I mean, and I feel like, dude, you're a congressman. You're supposed to respond to not just the media. I mean, forget the media, or at least respond to the constituents.
So how about all the like other politicians in general, if GEC were to say, hey, you know what, with this whole thing with Congressman San Nicolas,
It's not just Mike. It's
we
not
we
just
want to
the
look at all your,
congressman.
we want to audit all of your things.
Yeah.
Do you think that we would see the same level of discrepancy in those audits that we see in Congressman San Nicolas's? Or
Yeah, to be fair, yeah, the campaign finance, and just go back, just Google Guam campaign finance, KUAM, and you'll see all the stories I've done about, over the limit donations, and they just don't have the staff. It's the same old song and dance of Guam. The GEC doesn't have the staff, they don't have the manpower, they don't have the time to go through and review everybody's campaign finance stuff, which is why I did it for them. I did all these stories on all these, questionable, and the law is pretty clear on what you can donate as a business, as an individual. And so I felt like it's almost the same thing with the Chamorro Land Trust. I go out here and investigate this stuff, and I present it to the government, and nothing happens. So it's the same thing with the campaign finance. I mean, there was stuff with the Bota campaign, there was stuff with the Leon Guerrero Tenorio campaign, there was stuff with Jim Espaldon, public auditor Doris Flores Brooks. Yeah, so campaign finance violations, it's rampant, and it's an area where the GEC and the legislature and whoever, they need to go in there, they need to police it, they need to flag violations, they need to fine people. And the reason why people do it is because there's no threat of anything. They're like, oh, well, what are they going to do? Fine us? They haven't fined anybody. I don't think they've ever fined anybody.
Well, we'll tell you what, we are getting a couple more comments right now. Ken was actually saying the audio level is fine, so thank you for that.
Thanks. Right.
Looking out on the
Yeah.
technical end. Asha, if you can actually bring up this one comment, it's from Jonathan Singh. We'll pop that up on screen right now, and he was actually saying, where I come from, silence is acceptance. That's a sentiment that's actually been shared by a
lot
few
of people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in various ways. It's kind of like it's a cliche, but some people are saying, you cannot say anything and protect your butt. Other people are saying, guilt by admission, by being
And
silent.
let's be fair, right? So we feel, and we reported that he didn't come out and say, no, I'm not having an affair with that woman, or I never had sex. He didn't do a Bill Clinton or anything. But he said the allegations have no basis or whatever, right? But people want that direct answer. And, when he's dancing all around the direct answer, it just makes him look guilty. And so, yeah, I agree with Jonathan. But, to be fair, it wasn't total silence from the congressman. I mean, he posted on Facebook. What kind of world are we living in 2019 where, we're satisfied with a Facebook post from a public official?
Well, let's examine this right now. Could this be the future? Yeah, could this be the future of public relations?
I hope not.
And of
I
integration
hope
with,
not. I hope
with,
not.
with
It's
the
a
media.
loss for transparency. It really is. And the thing is, everyone
I mean,
else
it is
is
part
accountable.
of the future. So
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It is.
But I think there should be a
I-
balance.
you opened this
Definitely.
very live stream by saying, isn't it crazy we're getting our story tips now from Facebook?
Because that's one thing the congressman has been successful at, is he's not responding to us. So, I mean, it's newsworthy. What he does is newsworthy, whether it's something about the buildup or something with the Department of Interior. So we don't only lose when we try and ask him about things that we're looking into that may be critical. We also lose in that he doesn't share any information about things that people need to know, like war claims updates. We don't get any releases from the congressman. Sometimes our friends in media will share them, but again, if we're not getting a response, we have an obligation to inform the public. So we got to go where the information is, and where the information is with the congressman, it's on his multiple Facebook accounts. And so I think he's established that, and he's just fine with that because, again, there's no room for any kind of interaction back and forth. But we're going to find you one way or another. You have a town hall, we're going to be there. I'm not going to, the public deserves better, and Facebook is not an official means of communication. You're a congressman. You're supposed to respond to your house email. Facebook Messenger is not secure. So all you people who go on Facebook and say, oh, well, just message them on Facebook, that is not a secure platform. And carrying out his official duties as a congressman, he's supposed to use the official channels. And so who knows what they could be messaging, on
And
Facebook.
even if it is encrypted, technically, people are going to screenshot that, until the end of time.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, like, there's
Any
no,
conversation thread's
there's-
gonna be
if you
captured.
email the congressman on his official House account, it's documented with Congress. If you message him on his political Facebook or whatever, I mean, who knows what he's saying? It's just not. It's not in the realm of transparency. And although it may be the way we all operate now with WhatsApp, I mean, for public officials, it should be different.
Okay, Ken, there is a really interesting comment there. Asha, let's get Lisa's comment up because Lisa is saying...
All right, we got Lisa saying, hoping all this is solved ASAP. Guam has more pressing issues that need to be addressed.
We agree with the first part. We really hope this is resolved as soon as possible.
Well, how's it going to be resolved?
That's what we're hoping
I
for.
think really the thing that, and the congressman has done this and coming out, he's like, hey, file an ethics complaint. And I think he's banking on John Paul Manuel not filing that complaint because at the end of the day, if John Paul Manuel came out and said, I helped him cover these things up, I helped him do that, then he's complicit in it. So he probably doesn't want to file that complaint because of that.
Well, final question as we wrap up, Chris. Where this story stands today, is this really, is it a case of the ball's now in Mike San Nicolas' court and it's his to deal with? Or is this just the tip of the iceberg and there could be much more and many more dimensions that we have to unpack and parse and consider with this issue?
Well, I don't know. I think the congressman is, we're going to talk about balls in his court. I don't even think he's at the gym. I think that he's just, he just put this Facebook post out there and we're all just supposed to, I guess, fall for this vast conspiracy of the FBI is investigating everybody in Guam because everybody in Guam is dirty and local and only the federal government can be trusted. I mean, that's essentially what San Nicolas is saying, which is ridiculous. It's an insult to Guam. And I don't know how you guys are okay with a congressman picking up everything, moving over to D.C., and then hating on everything we are here. And I just, it's not sustainable, really. It's just not. And I think I got to go back and say last election was a fluke. And I want to see what's going to happen is when somebody real runs against the congressman, he's going to have to come out of social media. He's going to have to, log off of Facebook, come out into the real world. And that's when the media is going to descend on him and be like, hey, you've been ignoring us, for your whole term. Now here we are.
Madeline Medina has not commented on this yet, right?
I don't even know what she's doing.
All right, well,
It's a good follow, Jason.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good episode, good discussion today on TrendSpotting. If you are just catching up or you've been living on a rock and you haven't heard any of this news, you can find all of it at KOM.com or check our social media channels. You can find Chris's 11-minute...
The FBI hasn't called me, by the way.
Yeah, we can't talk about it. We can't talk about ongoing FBI
Yeah, how was that?
investigation
So
here.
he comes out and he says there's an active FBI investigation into everybody in Guam because they're so dirty, because they're local Chamorros. But I can't really talk about it because it's going to, compromise the investigation.
Oh, Tito has a good quote here, good comment here. It's only gossip until some complaint is filed.
I don't agree, Tito. And Tito, sometimes I agree with what you say, but I feel like the system is designed to protect the congressman. And if the allegation is that he's having an affair, if someone as thorough as the congressman is able to cover that up, then why are we expecting John Paul to have proof? He said himself, the congressman would make me delete messages in front of him. So I feel like that's why I'm just not even whatever with the affair. I mean, if he's, banging his, congressional staffer and someone files a complaint, it's going to come out. And they're not going to be able to cover it up. And, on Guam, there's no such thing as a secret. And, I got to admit, I've heard about this affair before John Paul Manuel, and I've heard about it from different people. So I believe it. And I only believe it because I've heard it from different people. I didn't just hear it from John Paul Manuel. These people talk on Guam, you know what I mean? There's no such thing as a secret. And usually about the 6th, 7th time you hear a rumor, that means some part of it's true. Anyway, so I gotta go. I got stuff to do.
And on that note, we thank you for streaming us right now. But remember, the conversation continues, everybody. So if you were just watching, sitting back intently, for all we know, you were sitting back, maybe it was lunchtime and you were hanging out with your phone. You may have had a huge 80-inch HD TV screen and you were watching this with your entire department, having your own conversations. We would love to hear your thoughts on this. Please continue to have this conversation because we continue to work on it. That's it for TrendSpotting. We are here every Thursday at lunchtime. We'll see you next week with more issues, more of your comments, and more feedback. See you later.